Buonasera a tutti. Good evening, everybody. It is now Monday, May 13th, just past 9:30 p.m. And coming live on What's the Scoop episode number 24 with my buddy for the first time joining on here, my buddy Carson Shear. How you doing, bud?
Hey, what's up, Ryan? Good to be here. What's going on, everybody? And ready to talk some sports and have a good show. Good to be here.
Excellent. Appreciate it, man. Let's just jump right into it because I think we both know where this is going to start. As soon as I found out yesterday that the NBA draft lottery had begun with, or ultimately ended up with your Detroit Pistons ending up with the number 5 selection, I made a beeline to go directly to my Instagram account to see what the Carson Shear Show had to say about that one. PA Scratcher guy saying hello. How you doing, bud? Thanks for coming on to the show. Hope you're doing well. So yeah, Kurt's coming and says, looking at this tag team. How you doing, Kurt? Hope you had a good day, man.
Kurt?
Glad to have you on the Scoops and the Legend. Really appreciate you coming on, bro. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So obviously, just talk a little bit about your reaction to that selection. Also, just what your takeaway is in the aftermath of that. Like, because obviously you can't really say why they keep having that type of luck, but just tell me what your reaction was when you saw that.
Yeah, it's the Pistons' luck, man. I was watching this lottery. I was chatting with my friends, and I'm saying, dude, if we get this 5th pick again, we were on like a 26 or 27, 28 game losing streak, tied the longest losing streak ever in franchise NBA record history. And it just could not have gone any worse for the Pistons this year. And I'm watching this lottery, and I'm watching the deputy commissioner open these envelopes, and I'm thinking to myself, if he shows the Pistons at pick 5, I'm just going to go ballistic. And what does he do? He opens the envelope. The Detroit Pistons have pick number 5. And at that moment, man, I just absolutely lost self-control. It's unbelievable. I think I saw something the last 5 years in a row. The team that has had the worst regular season record in the NBA has not won the lottery. And especially last year with the Pistons having the worst record, getting pick 5, fine, bad luck, whatever. It happens again with pick 5. And the craziest thing to me is some of the teams, the whole lottery system is so flawed as a concept in general. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. First of all, they don't even show the draft lottery live. The ping pong ball's bouncing around. You're just trusting these guys open these envelopes, and there's the pick, and there's the team that you get, and it's crazy, man. It's unfortunate. Luckily, though, it isn't really a hugely star-studded draft class this year. I think Alex Sarr is projected to go number 1. There's a couple guys you could consider to be the number 1 pick, but the fact that the Atlanta Hawks, the team that had, I think, the second worst odds to win the number 1 pick as a play-in team. Same with the Golden State Warriors. They were representing a couple of these teams that made the playoffs. Why are they even considered a chance to win the lottery? It's just beyond me. The system is broken, and that's just the way the Pistons have been going the past several years. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So who knows what happens? But yeah, I was obviously pretty unhappy when that happened.
Yeah, I could tell, and I can only imagine. And actually, you talked about the years consecutively that top team, number 1 team projected has not gotten the top pick. I think that actually started with my Pelicans back with Zion in 2019. Because I remember that was just, I mean, obviously, we both heard from the Knicks fans all offseason long about the offseason they were going to have.
Yeah.
But I get into that into a second because I want to get into Kurt's question here. Carson, is this the year the Pistons trade the lottery pick for a vet?
Honestly, why not, Kurt? If there's a guy, I really would like to see the Pistons take a chance on Donovan Clingan. I really think he could impact this team. That's why I really desperately wanted to at least get a minimum of top 3. I feel like if you have the worst record in basketball, you should be getting a top 3 pick. You can say all this debate about tanking or that it's going to force these teams not to tank. It's like the way this Pistons luck is go, though. Literally, just blow up this entire roster. You cannot have a worse season next year than you can this year. This was the worst record we've ever had. I mean, literally, it was a bunch of bums walking on a basketball court, and it was absolutely horrendous. You could do any move that you want. It would be better than the moves that Troy Weaver, our general manager, has done this season. So why not, Kurt? You trade a pick and a player and go get a veteran and try to make this thing happen, man. You know, it's unfortunate that this league is so heavily star driven, especially drafting is so important. You know, you got to make a move, and you have to have at least a top 10 player in basketball to even have a chance at contending and thinking about contending in the NBA. So why not? I'm all for it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, I just want to jump and just make a quick shout out because I just saw her on here. Shout out to a longtime friend of mine, Jess Andrews. It seems like this finally went live on my account this week. So just want to say thanks to Jess for tuning in. I hope you and Kurt are doing well and hope to see you all again soon. Because it's funny because both of the last things you said, I feel like you're somehow reading my mind because you keep saying things I was about to jump into. This happened last week as well. But so, yeah, the first thing I want to ask is, don't you think that there's a possibility that what we're seeing these last few years with the draft lottery is actually, because I discussed this the other day on another show, don't you think there's an argument that some of these of what's happening is a good thing for the league or the association, whatever you want to say? Because again, you're looking around not necessarily just NBA, but you're looking at other sports teams that are very obviously at most tanking and at bare minimum not trying to actually be competitive every year, not prioritizing that. You know, I don't need to go into the list of teams. We both know them. So do you think that there's an argument to be made on the counter side of it that because it is clearly making it not necessarily pointless, but at least greatly diminishing the motivation or why there'd be a motivation to try and, if you want to call it, tank, you know, going back to the days of, you know, suck for luck in the NFL and all of that. Do you think that is there a valid counter argument there, do you think, or do you think it's so bad in that direction that it kind of negates that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. And I think there's a difference between teams intentionally tanking versus like a once in a generational lifetime talent like you saw last year with Victor Wembanyama versus actually just flat out being bad at basketball on your roster. I'm not even kidding. This Pistons team was absolute trash. And it's unfortunate that the NBA continuously punishes teams that are flat out blatantly bad and not even getting rewarded a chance at even a top 3 pick. And the Pistons have been in the situation time and time again where that seems to be the case. The whole system is totally flawed in the NBA, the lottery itself. You said, you know, the NHL does it with a different system as well, similar to a lottery style. NFL is just straight up whoever has the worst record gets the first pick. And then, you know, baseball has their own shtick on it as well. So I think it's definitely a fair case. But I think there's also a difference between intentionally tanking versus actually your team totally just flat out sucks at basketball. That even if you tried as hard as you could, you wouldn't get rewarded. And I think it depends on the class year as well, because teams damn well know who's the top prospect. They're all on social media. They got tons of scouts watching overseas. You know, is there a once in a lifetime generational type player? And you can literally see it if it's happening. There was an instance, you know, look at Mark Cuban with the Mavericks a couple years ago. You know, that was a whole scandal where he was literally trying to throw the game away just to get in the lottery. So if there's instances like that, I think that definitely is a problem. But if your team just flat out sucks, there's no reason why the Pistons should not be getting at least a top 3 pick. So I think that's definitely interesting that you brought that up. But I think there's a difference between tanking versus actually flat out being bad on your roster.
Just before I respond to that, the PA Scratcher guy says NFL draft format is the best way to go. I wish other sports would adopt their format. Yeah, I think the NFL has frequently in the last few years on one thing or another been ahead of the curve. You know, obviously they continue to dominate American sports, and it's not hard to see why. The question that I would have in response to that, I think, is, pardon me, looking at what you have across other sports. So you talked about the 3 difference between NFL, NHL, NBA, and kind of each one where the NFL doesn't have a lottery, but MLB is kind of out of date in their own way. I talked about how you can't even trade picks in MLB the other day, except for some specific ones. But like you just said, in terms of the split between who's trying to actively tank and who's just a crap team, how do you reconcile that in a way that you can make the rules, if you want to adjust them in a sense where they are rewarding those teams that are legitimately bad, if you want to say rewarding for lack of a better term, but also not going to a way that it can be exploited by teams that are just like, hey, we can get a cheap star on, and not have to pay 800 million, whatever it is. So, what do you have any sort of ideas as to how you would implement that?
Yeah, and it's tough to say because, again, the sport of basketball it is so driven around you could have one superstar and your team could get well in the playoffs, but if you don't have that one superstar, it's incredibly difficult to compete and to contend in the playoffs because it's a best of 7 series, whereas the NFL, you get in the playoffs, you have one bad game, you can get upsets left and right. So I think that's the problem. I think it's the sport in general does this lottery system because they know in the playoffs it's a best of 7 series and who is actually the best team in the playoffs versus just one and done, like a March Madness type style deal where you get in the playoffs and you're one and done. You win, you go on, you lose, you go home. So, yeah, I really don't honestly have an answer for you, Ryan. But I think definitely the way this system is going right now, though, it's definitely been a huge problem. I don't know who needs to fix it. Maybe it's Silver needs to figure out a different rule, but these teams just can't continuously. I'm with both sides. I don't agree with tanking because, it shouldn't, if you're intentionally throwing guys on the bench, you're benching your stars, that's blatantly obvious. And I think it comes down to that. Are teams really tanking or are they actually just have a bad roster? And they just flat out need help because what are the Pistons supposed to do, honestly? In case like this and teams that are struggling that did make the playoffs, it's going to take, it took like Giannis, I think like 7 years until he got a championship. Jokic was the same path. Right. It takes a long time and you really need to hit on your prospects in the draft because if you don't, it's going to be a million years before you even blink at a title.
It's very true. And going back to the guy that you were talking about real quick, Clingan, and then I'm going to get to Kurt's comment. I did pull about half a dozen mock drafts before the show, and I saw him anywhere from 3 to as low as 9. So there is still, I think, a chance for y'all, even at 5, to potentially get him. But obviously, your odds are a little more handicapped than they would have been staying at 3 or above. Getting to Kurt's message, he says, I know a lot of people have said this, but can they do a tournament with the lottery teams and make them play? Winner of tournament gets the first pick and so on. You start with this one.
Yeah, and I think it'd be kind of almost a reverse method, kind of what Kurt was saying. If you incentivize and rewarded, you take like the bottom 10 teams in the NBA instead of the lottery system, you compete it out. You take the worst of the worst, you put them in like a small little tournament, and then that's who ends up getting the first pick, which is actually, in my opinion, I like that idea and model better compared to just having a bunch of ping pong balls decide the outcome. So I would be a fan of that if they were to do something like that.
Yeah, actually, Kurt, I got to say, I 100% agree with you on that. I think that might be the best alternative to the current protocol, I guess you'd say, that I've heard, because I hear this stuff that people, and again, I'm not someone who truly believes that the ping pong ball, whatever you want to say, the current format of doing the draw, just because it's behind the scenes, I'm not someone who believes it's particularly rigged, because in my opinion, if it's rigged, why would they put, even as a Pelicans fan, why would they put Zion on the Pelicans of all teams, who had the number 7 ranked odds that year, when obviously New York and a couple of other teams had much better odds, twice as much as New Orleans did. So that's my one thing with that. But I do agree that there has to be some sort of modifications made, and I think that Kurt's idea was probably the best one that I've heard. He also says NBA has to do this. If you don't play in the game, you don't get paid for that game. That stops the load management I'll say it, bullshit. That stops the intentional tanking. No pay, no play. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken a little bit about the load management deal. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same side of that whole issue. I do think that guys, and we're going to have another rare occurrence. I just agreed with Kurt on the sports take, and now I'm going to defend his Knicks. What is tonight? I mean, his guy on the Knicks, Dante DiVincenzo, he got kept out of being able to win a certain award by, I think it was like 2 minutes or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but he just barely missed eligibility. Now, again, I agree with the fact that you should have the opportunity to do that, but it also just sucked for me to see somebody get that close to eligibility. I think that it's great if you have, and again, the baseline has to be the baseline. You can't start moving the baseline because then you're going to blur it and all of that. I do understand that. So I'm curious how NBA continues to enforce that, because again, like we've seen, there are teams who still find ways to circumvent that and find ways to manipulate that. That's probably going to be always the case, unfortunately. But it's how do you find that middle ground between it's the right balance of hardest to manipulate, but also is not going to go the other way and screw over players and teams at the same time. Trevor Saltzman, how you doing, Trevor? Glad to have you on tonight. Says, I understand your frustration, Corson. The Pistons have to do better at drafting and developing. The Nuggets never had the first overall pick. They went out and found players. None of their core players were a top 5 player in the draft. And I'm going to take 30 seconds to make this right here, because obviously whenever we talk NBA, you know that I have to bring up the MJ LeBron controversy. The one thing I will say is that is one reason why I think that all of these LeBron couldn't win without superstars, blah, 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 takes are complete BS a lot of the time, because again, how many players have we seen try to link up with other great players recently and fail miserably? Either the chemistry is not good, the coach, the executive's not good, the injury history is not good. Something always goes wrong. Most of the assembled, if you want to call it fully assembled. I'm not counting the Warriors, because that team just brought on Durant. They were already great to begin with. But the teams that LeBron has put together in Cleveland, in Miami, and in LA, those teams were completely coming together for the first time, and he made it work with all these different guys. So that's why I'm going to always, I think probably always, be on the opposite side of that whole thing. But again, that's just a little personal note that I had to get in there. Trevor says, Corson, what's your thoughts on the Pistons I'm glad he just asked this, because this was going to be my next question. What are your thoughts on the Pistons trying to go after Timberwolves president of baseball operations, Tim Connolly? Connolly knows how to draft and develop. He did a great job with the Nuggets.
Yeah, I would absolutely love Connolly, Trevor. You know, there's been rumors that the Pistons are definitely high on him. And unfortunately, we live in a society where money talks. And if the Pistons make him a crazy offer like they did, you know, what Jody's saying with Monty Williams, he could definitely become our next GM, because I can't even imagine a world where our current GM, Troy Weaver, is still on this team for another season managing this roster with all the crazy moves that he's done. So yeah, the Timberwolves, I mean, like, he built the Nuggets straight up. He built the Timberwolves straight up from where they were. We need a guy like that can totally change the culture. So I would totally love Connolly for sure, Trevor.
We've got, first of all, just real quick, we got Burnell coming in and saying hi. And of course, Mr. Osborne, thank you so much to both of y'all for tuning in. I hope both of y'all had wonderful weekends and a nice holiday. Did the Pistons overpay for Williams is the question from Jody Moncrief.
Yeah, and that's such a weird question. It's not directly at Jody, because I've got this question asked all the time, being a Pistons fan, because that's more of a Tom Gore's ownership move, because that doesn't really affect the salary cap. You can pay a coach, you know, however much you want, because it doesn't really go into the players' payroll. It's kind of separate from players versus staff. But I mean, yeah, you're the highest paid coach in NBA history. You better make some playoff runs. So I think definitely this season was a disappointment for sure, Jody, definitely.
keeping it with Corson, did the Lions overpay Goff? This is a great segue into what I was going to talk about next, that big extension that just came down today. I think it was 4 years, $212 million, 170 guaranteed, if I'm remembering that correctly. That's off the top of my head. But do you think that the Lions overpaid your quarterback?
You know what? Honestly, a tiny bit. But at the same time, the salary cap goes up every single year. There's other quarterbacks who are still on rookie contracts that are looking to get paid. I think long term, they were thinking long term, and you got to kind of have to think about that, with these discounts and with inflation going on and salary caps just constantly going up. So I think a little bit, I was shocked to see over $50 million a year for Jared Goff, because that puts him, I think, in top 3 right now for quarterbacks paid by season, right behind Joe Burrow. So I would say yes, but at the same time, you kind of had to pay him, because who else are you going to put behind, our starting offensive line, considering what he just did for the city, winning their first ever playoff game at Ford Field, winning the NFC North, the division title in so long. I think Goff is a great quarterback. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks, and he's not the most mobile quarterback in the world, but bottom line is he wins football games, and he was up a good 3 scores at halftime against the Niners in the NFC Championship game. And then obviously we all know how that went, but I think he's definitely capable of winning a Super Bowl. And, you take a look at, like I said, with the salary cap constantly going up, sure, did they overpay? Sure, a little bit, but it's like you kind of had to. If you got your guy, he can play, he's skilled, he can do it. And I think the Lions definitely believe that with Jared Goff. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm happy they did at the same time.
I think it's all, oh, hang on. Got a comment that I think this is from Kenny. Says, if Goff wins a Super Bowl with the Lions, it will be the best $50 million they spent. It's interesting how we talk a little bit about how if you believe that a guy in the draft is your quarterback, you got to draft him even if it's a little bit high. But when it comes to free agency, there's not that same sort of, mindset where if you got to be willing to overpay a little bit. When it's overpaid free agency, all of a sudden it's, people look at it from a much different lens. It's kind of interesting. Jody Moncrief says, how much does Ben Johnson make Goff?
A lot, Jody. And I think definitely there was a lot of questions. Is Ben Johnson going to stay with us another year? Is he going to go get a head coaching job? I think arguably he's the best offensive coordinator in football right now. He literally took the worst football team of all time, arguably in the Lions, and he turned them into contenders. Yeah, sure, Brad Holmes got him the pieces to do it, but you still need a guy that can call plays. So I think definitely they both complement each other well. I'm glad that Ben Johnson is staying with us for another season, because there's something just different about the aura and the culture that our front office has established. Guys want to come play for the Lions. That Dan Campbell, I think, has a huge part in that as well, because he's been a former player. He's been through this team. He was on the 0-16 team. So he understands relationships and how to win football games. His coaching antics aren't exactly traditional, a little unorthodox, but I think guys love playing for him. So Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn came back. Everybody wants to win a Super Bowl here in Detroit. And I think, and like Kenny said, if the Lions win a Super Bowl, hell yeah, he's worth $50 million. If they did it this year, if the Lions won it this year, Goff might have been getting $55 to $60 million a year. Who knows? So you got to pay your guys, and you're betting on them long term, because you can get them. It sounds expensive now, but if they show up in the postseason, it's almost at a discount, quote unquote.
If Jared Goff went to Super Bowl there, he's never going to pay for another meal in the state of Michigan.
They'll build a statue of him for sure. Retired and everything.
Keith Brugman, how you doing, bud? I'm glad you were able to tune in. Says, amazing Goff and Wentz. I'm going to do everybody a favor and not get started on Carson Wentz right now. Amazing Goff and Wentz were both at the top of their draft. Look now. I'm going to reserve comment on that one. Ask teams with trash QBs if the Lions overpaid. Yeah. Trevor. Trevor says, with the Goff extension now in play. We were talking about this earlier, so I'm also curious as to your thought.
Yeah.
Because he and I were going back and forth on this. With the Goff extension now in place, was the Lions draft pick of QB Hendon Hooker in 2023 a wasted pick? Seems like Detroit could have gotten another starter in the 3rd round instead of a backup quarterback.
I don't think he is. A lot of my friends are talking about that. Hooker, I think, is a guy who's still unproven because he hasn't played at all. He came off I believe it was an ACL injury last year when the Lions took him. He was the front runner to win the Heisman Trophy. I can't wait to see him in the preseason this year. But I do not mind having Hendon Hooker as a backup quarterback and that's just it. He's an insurance policy because if Goff goes down one play away, God forbid that happens, Hooker can get his chance to rise. And if he performs well, maybe become a trade asset down the line. So I think it was a second or third rounder that we used.
Third rounder. It was 68th overall.
Third rounder, yeah. So we could have maybe gotten a starter, but again, if he's a quality backup quarterback, which I think he can be, I wouldn't say that's a waste of a pick.
All right. Carson, Stafford or Goff?
Man, Stafford's my guy. I grew up watching him my whole childhood. I was super thrilled that he won a Super Bowl with the Rams, and I think you could arguably say this is probably the biggest win-win trade of all time. The Rams, they went all in. They said, F them draft picks. Let's go get our quarterback, Matthew Stafford. Next year, they beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl. And the Lions, without that trade, man, we are absolutely nowhere. We got Goff out of it. We got a bunch of draft picks, assets. Goff's a little bit younger than Stafford is right now. So it's really hard to say that question, but obviously Jared Goff's my quarterback. So I got to go with Goff right now for sure.
Yeah, that was really interesting to see how both teams worked out so well.
Mm-hmm.
Who wins the Super Bowl first? Hurts, Goff, or neither? Oh, this is how we're going to be closing this out.
He's playing with flames, Keith. You're playing with flames.
Yeah. You go first on this one.
Oh man. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Ryan's Eagles. They've continuously just showing up in the draft every single year. They're right there with the Lions in terms of their front office. And they made a bet as well. Jalen Hurts got him to Super Bowl. They came up short, but he got a giant contract as well. So the Eagles believe that he can lead them to the promised land. And I think the Lions did the same thing with Goff, So it's such a tough question to ask because the talent is very similar, but I have to go with my Lions. I think I think the Eagles have the right players in place, but I think overall talent-wise right now, especially on offense, arguably I think just because the Lions, if they still had Kelsey, maybe the Eagles and Hurts, but I think right now I think the Lions with Goff.
I'll say real quick, my answer would be whoever's team gets the number one seed in the NFC first, because I don't think Goff goes in and wins in Philly, and I don't think Hurts goes into Detroit and wins there. So I think it's whoever has the one seed first between the two.
For sure, I agree.
Yeah, Carson, I know you got to start to head out in a second here, but first I want to say thank you so much for coming on for a little while and talking with me and sharing a bunch of your stuff. Just want to say, Kenny says, please make this NFC Championship. I'm assuming he's talking to your Lions. I doubt that he spent enough time at the pub to be talking about my Eagles that way. But guys, I'll let you do it because I don't exactly know which platforms you're on. But let's talk a little bit about this Carson Shear show, and let's get some of the guys out here affiliated with the content that you've been putting out.
Yeah, and I got like 5-10 more minutes, so I'm not in any hurry either. But yeah, the Carson Shear show. I started my own kind of YouTube sports show about a year ago, I want to say, just when the Lions started their season. So yeah, the Carson Shear show. You can find me on everywhere, literally Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. I'm on it all. Mostly reaction videos. Any news that breaks, that happens, I give my thoughts and opinions about it. I talk about the Tigers, any local Detroit sports teams, I give my reactions to. But anything else happening right now, I'm covering the NBA playoffs right now. So I'm doing that. But yeah, man, the Carson Shear show on all socials as well.
I'm going to tell you this. if you want to go on and find somebody who has the energy of a fan but the knowledge of an analyst, you'll be hard pressed to find someone better than Carson and his show.
Hey,
He
thanks,
always
Ryan.
he always has the emotion that fans can relate to, but he always is thinking with his head as well in terms of what things actually mean going forward and in the short term. So I can't
Appreciate
recommend
it.
his show enough.
Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely, bro. What grade do you give the Lions for their offseason, Carson? This is from Trevor.
Yeah, off season, probably a B plus. There wasn't that crazy big giant off season signing that we did this off season. We got a bunch of pieces on defense. DJ Reader especially, I think, is a really underrated signing. He's going to beef up our defensive line. Got a couple great corners, and then even the draft. We took Terrion Arnold. He was our guy. We traded up a little bit to get him. We got Ennis Rakestraw Jr., another great corner from Missouri. They doubled down on corner in the draft. And it's just hard to tell right now because we got to wait and see how it pans out next season. But as far as a Lions fan looking in, I would say probably a B plus right now.
That's fair. Since you mentioned Terrion Arnold, I just got to say, Roll Tide.
There you go.
Keith, if the Lions and Eagles and Lions traded quarterbacks, talk about how your teams would be different. Wow. He always has such
that's
good
crazy.
You want to start this, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah. Wow. I honestly, it's quarterback's the leader of your football team. So, Goff has this different mentality of riling up his troops and getting the job done. And Jalen Hurts is a little bit younger than Goff is. So he has a different mindset and a way of approaching things in two completely different games. Obviously, Hurts is way more mobile.
Right.
I think Goff probably has a little bit better of an arm than Jalen Hurts does.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so they're kind of similar, but they're also different in the same aspect. And I think coordinators help a lot. The weapons help a lot. I think it all comes down to O-line right now. I think probably right now the Lions have a little bit better O-line than the Eagles do. But, I think, if they swap places, they probably would still both make the playoffs.
I agree with that. I think you hit it right on the head with the playing style. I think just because Philly is so built to be a running team and Goff is just not that. I think that I trust Campbell and Johnson more to be creative with moving Hurts in there than I trust Sirianni and our new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, to build up a team for Jared Goff that can circumvent the offensive line questions. So I would say Detroit would probably get a little bit of an advantage there.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, thank you for that question. That was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we have any further? I think the Lions would depend more on the run. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's usually going to be the case. Johnson or Moore? If you're talking about Brian Johnson, it's Kellen Moore, and that might be the least difficult question I've ever been asked. The motion that we're going to see this year that we were sorely lacking. Literally, I think we were last in the league in motion last year, and now we're going into a guy with top 10. Definitely grateful that we got Moore. He was the guy that I wanted. I think it's Megatron, excuse me.
Oh, receivers. Okay. Maybe. I don't know. Was that what you're referring to, Jody? Ben Johnson or Kellen Moore or Calvin Johnson and Herman Moore? Megatron by a mile for sure. It's not even close. But Ben Johnson or Kellen Moore, I'd probably go with Ben Johnson. But I think that's an interesting question.
I screwed up because I thought he meant Brian Johnson, the OC we fired. I'm sorry, I completely messed that up. Okay, in that case, I'd rather have Ben Johnson. I'm sorry, we all misinterpreted that question in different ways. I don't even know who. What do you say, Evan Moore? I don't even know who that is. Joey, Jody, you have to use first names. Yeah, that you just happen to name like two of the most popular surnames in the world. But that was funny. Okay, Ben Johnson or Kellen Moore. Then I would say Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson is the best OC in football.
For sure.
And caught up. All right. Excuse me. It sounds like we're caught up on questions right now. So if you have a second, I've got one more question. And if not, I'll let you go.
Definitely. One more. Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the Pistons. And The idea, I don't actually have something like put up with it written, but I kind of thought this as like bad boy or bad buy, as in
Okay.
is this a guy you would keep for the Pistons long term, or
I
is this
like
a
it.
guy that you think you need to move on from? And
Sure.
I'll go the three guys that are taking up the most of your cap next year. So first one, Cade Cunningham.
Oh, you got to keep him. I think definitely he's a bad boy. You got to keep him for sure.
Very nice. Evan Fournier says he has a club option, but it would be the highest on your team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a tough one. I'd probably say keep him. I think he's a solid vet who can shoot still at a reasonable percentage from three. So I think I would keep Evan.
Yeah, he has a 19 cap hit, 19 million cap hit. And then I'm going to ask this from an objective standpoint. Isaiah Stewart.
You got to keep Beef Stew, man. He's not the flashiest go get you 30 points a game player, but he is probably as closest to Dennis Rodman as you're going to find. He just will not take any crap from anybody, and I love that about him. I mean, you saw what he did to LeBron a couple years ago. He's just one of those guys, yeah, that just goes to work, just a really gritty player. And I think you kind of need those guys on your team. So I think definitely keep Beef Stew.
I think he went to the right fit for him culturally. Just
Yeah.
from watching him the time that I did back here, I think that he fits Detroit and Pistons basketball like a glove. Carson, who is a bad buy, if anyone, on your current team?
Oh, bad buy. You know what? I'm really afraid that we're going to overpay Tobias Harris in free agency. That is a move, especially if Weaver is still here. That could realistically happen. He was formerly here with the Pistons. We traded for him from the Magic to the Pistons. He was here for a couple of years, made a playoff push, and then traded him back to the Clippers, I believe. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's I just don't want to overspend for an aging veteran. And that's why it's just so important with drafting, with the lottery and everything. And it's you really need to hit on this draft pick. So that's what the Pistons got to do. But yeah, just don't overspend and pay a crazy amount for an aging vet. You kind of really need to hit on your younger guys if you want to really contend, and that's probably what's going to happen. We're probably going to give Cade a super max deal. God knows what that's going to be, but you literally have to keep him. If I don't know where you would go if you get rid of him. So I'm probably going to give Cade Cunningham a super max probably next year, whatever that ends up being. So yeah, welcome to the NBA. Where they get crazy money for putting a ball in the hole.
No, for real. Keith with another great question says Goff's new contract endangers what player from not being paid or being released next year?
That's a great question, Keith. Yeah, so we just paid Amon-Ra. We just paid Penei Sewell, made him the highest paid offensive lineman, and then Jared Goff just became the highest paid Lion of all time. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Brad, he bet on those three core guys. But you got to wonder, Aiden Hutchinson's deal coming up in a couple years from now. Aleem McNeil, he's a really great defensive tackle that we have. So probably Aleem McNeil, I would say, is kind of a borderline player who might walk and go after a bigger paycheck if the Lions don't give him what he wants. So I would say probably Aleem McNeil is a guy who, again, he wants to get paid soon. And that's probably the guy I think is in jeopardy of not bringing back.
Says branch safeties can be replaced. I'm pretty sure that's from Kenny. Real quick, you think DJ Reader could be that guy?
Yeah, I think especially, we gave him a pretty big contract. And I think that's kind of what Brad was thinking is let's go get more experience, a little bit older, more of a veteran presence, was with the Bengals for a couple years. And that's kind of, I think, what Brad's intention was. And even in the draft, too, Brad's secret weapon is giving him a draft pick. And he's proven it time and time again. Look at our weapons on offense right now with Laporta and Gibbs and Penei Sewell. Just an absolute masterclass. Brian Branch, Kenny mentioned, Jameson Williams. We'll see what happens with him. Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's so many guys that Brad has built through the draft, and that's what no GM in previous years could do for us.
Absolutely. Just want to just double check on where you're at real quick in terms of timing. We're going to get Keith's comment in here real quick.
Yeah.
Says fantastic show as always. Scoops, great guest spot, Corson. Yeah, again, Corson. I can't thank you enough. It was been a lot of fun having you on. We got to have you on more often. But thanks again, and I hope that the Pistons can still make good use of that 5 pick, and I hope that your Tigers are surprisingly doing well right now. Maybe they can keep that up as well.
Yeah, Tigers, I think they're, they won today against the Marlins. They're just above 500 right now, and we'll see what happens with them. But if they go above 500, I consider that a successful season. So fingers crossed.
Absolutely, and good luck to you on that. It's great having you, man, and thanks again.
For sure. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. See you guys.
Have a good night, brother.
Yeah, take care. See you, buddy.
All right. Thank you to my buddy Carson for being on tonight. Glad to have him on. Hope you guys, excuse me, hope we'll be able to have him back on soon to talk a little more Detroit sports. But I knew that with everything that's happened the last couple of days, I knew that he was going to have some interesting perspective. And again, I do recommend one more time that you go and watch his Carson Shear show, which is available on, I know Instagram, but I believe other platforms as well. What are your thoughts within 5 years the Super Bowl will be on pay-per-view? I highly doubt it, just because I think that not fans, but I think that execs know that the Super Bowl gets so much attraction from households all over the world, really, of all different income levels. I understand that they're trying things out with this Apple TV and this. I just saw today actually that Roku is going to get Sunday Morning Baseball. I have Roku, so I'm excited about that. But I feel like the Super Bowl is one of those events that, because of the historic nature of it and because of how ubiquitous it always is, I feel like you can't change that to pay-per-view. So I would say less than 1%. Nicole Gizzy says, "Hi, Swifty Scoops." I saw this like 20 minutes ago and then it disappeared. I was going to react to it. That's why you saw me laughing in the background, if anybody caught that. But good to see you, Nikki. Appreciate you coming on. Hope you're doing well. And looks like we're caught up in the messages as of right now. So, pardon me. That being said, just going to jump around a little bit and talk about some of the other stuff that's going on. I do want to spend a second mentioning some stuff about my Yankees the last few days. There's been a strong resurgence from a couple of players. Luis Gil came in, and he's been having a strong case to stay in the rotation even when some other things come back. Gleyber Torres finally came in a big way and got a major hit over the weekend in that series against Tampa Bay, which, again, that catwalk, I could do an entire episode just based on that catwalk down at their stadium. But even Rays fans I saw on social media were talking about how ridiculous that thing is. I've got fans talking about, and blowing up my messages about how the right field in Yankee Stadium is 314 feet. Take care of your catwalk. Take care of the fact that home runs are getting stuck up there. And announcers, I don't know what's more amusing to listen to. Announcers talk about that, or announcers talk about how terrible of an umpire Angel Hernandez is. Because when the announcers, who are pretty objective, are able to pick up on both those things and they regularly comment on it, that's just, you got to do something there. Pardon me. Sorry. Carolina Hurricanes forced Game 6 back in Raleigh versus the Rangers. Let's go. Yes. Thank you, Nikki. For those who don't know, I have the Carolina Hurricanes winning it this year in a bracket challenge with which I'm with Nikki in that one. And I also just completely dislike the Rangers. Do not like Matt Rempe. Just don't like the Rangers across the board. So love hearing that. Thank you, Nikki, for giving me the scoop on that one. We're a little bit background on that. Scoops, are you knowledgeable on NASCAR? If so, what was its demise from the late 90s to today, and how did you fix it? Keith, I'll be honest with you. Until I saw the last week when there was that 1/1000th of a percent or 1/1000th of a second difference between the top two finishes. I hadn't watched NASCAR since I used to watch it with my grandfather when I was younger. I watched it with him quite a bit, but recently, after we lost guys like Jeff Gordon and some of the others retired, not been following it as much. So I'm going to respectfully just say that I cannot answer that question, but I do appreciate it. And I would say if you haven't seen it, to anybody who does follow NASCAR, go and check that out on find some sort of coverage on or review of the video on that, because that was wild to see those sort of, it wasn't like a collision, but there was like a side swipe and then jump in on that last one, again, that 100th or thousandth of a second. I don't even remember what it was, but it was a wild finish. And I definitely, even as someone who doesn't follow NASCAR as much as I used to, definitely could appreciate that. Scoop, I'm friends with Cesar Bacadella. He is a race car driver and owner. That's really cool. I'll have to look into that. Can try and get him on as a guest, and we can save that question. That'd be fantastic, because that is definitely one area, and that's one thing I've been trying to bring people on who can provide different perspectives. And I had Nikki on last week, who could talk more about hockey in 30 minutes than I ever could. I'd love to have somebody on who can talk NASCAR, and maybe that I can get back into it. Keith, we'd love to invite you on that show as well. Yeah, again, Keith, and same as the other guys I've talked about, Kurt, everybody over there at both networks, always an open invitation to jump on here. In fact, I'm going to have somebody on this coming Sunday. We just confirmed, expecting to have one of the four horsemen, as they call themselves, over at DBR on the Rocky Mountain Sports Network. Going to have him on Sunday night. Can't wait for that. It was a lot of fun doing the draft coverage, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that show's got planned for everybody. Now NASCAR is getting to attract more manufacturers. They are talking about getting rid of V8 pushed engines which will be a detriment. Yeah, honestly, I don't know what that means. I'm a big NASCAR guy. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've thought at times about trying to get back into it. What I am into, though, I'll say, is the Mecum auctions. I do enjoy seeing like the classic cars they have there. If they've got a 60s Dodge Challenger, I always enjoy looking at them. And the Dodge, I think I talked about Hellcats the other day on because I was asked about my favorite purple thing, and I mentioned the Dodge Hellcat there as well. Your NFL official guest was great too. Yeah, Coach DeBello is absolutely fantastic when it comes to football. It was fantastic in general, but he's always got a lot of insight from multiple perspectives when it comes to NFL, but obviously also other leagues as well. And I've been really enjoying seeing what UFL has been like and kind of comparing it to NCAAF and also NFL. Nikki says Colorado Avalanche are down 1-0 to the Dallas Stars. Okay, so there's your update for those who are following from Denver. That's the latest score check. And Jody says, I love NASCAR. Yeah, I used to be a big Jeff Gordon fan. In fact, real quick story, but I was younger and I had just gotten it was still called Twitter, and I had just gotten to Twitter, and I have the same birthday on August 4th. I have the same birthday as Jeff Gordon. So I had direct messaged him or commented to him, something like that, just saying happy birthday and saying, my grandfather was a big fan of yours, et cetera, et cetera. And he actually acknowledged the message and, said he appreciated it. So just kind of cool story there that pertained to Jeff Gordon, who I always enjoy watching. Your dream classic car is, it's got to be a 69 Challenger. I love those. Just the way that they, I don't even really know how to describe it. Just the aesthetic of the car, the way that I've watched it, and obviously some classic movies. It's just it would be a Dodge Challenger, ideally from around that time period, probably. I can't think of any alternatives right now. So let's go with that. But Dodge also has others like the Charger, like I mentioned. So you call it something in that realm. 67 SS Chevelle. Well, that's a good choice too. That was the last comment. Okay, just wanted to verify that. But no, I think that there's and I've got a good friend of mine from that I graduated with who's into, and I don't know how similar or different they are, but she's big into the F1. She follows, I don't even remember what it. I think it was Ferrari. I want to say. Again, I know very little about this, so if I sound like I'm completely like a novice on this, it's because I am. But yeah, so she was trying to get me into watching that, and I haven't. It hasn't been in my mind to do so when I've actually had the opportunity to do so. But I'm curious if you could tell me like if that's like any sort of similarity, or is that just like completely two like different animals, like water and oil type of deal. But yeah, I'm trying to remember because it was Gordon, it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. Rest in peace, obviously the senior. And there was one other driver whose name I know I saw Kyle Busch, watched him. Actually, Kyle Busch, I don't know if it's still available, but Kyle Busch once did a very sweet My Wish on ESPN with the kid whose name was also Kyle. I remember watching that and just being very just moved by that. So if that is still somehow available to watch, I do recommend watching it if you can. Tony Stewart. No, that wasn't who I'm thinking of, and it's bugging the heck out of me. But if I remember it, I'll message you or bring it on for the next show. But pardon. But yeah, I know that there was also a NASCAR simulator that we had where there was a couple of cars specifically that I went on. There was a car that had like I think it was like represented by Cheerios. I want to say it was. So I used to watch that for the car itself, but I don't recall who the driver of that car was at this very moment. Also, since we were talking about updates from playoff games, just an NBA playoff update for everybody. The Dallas Mavericks are currently ahead by 11 at home versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Mavericks have a 2-1 lead on that series. So just since we talked about hockey, thought I would get in a little NBA update there. But pardon. But yeah, I meant to say this when Carson was on, but I think it definitely does help that with regard to NBA, I think it does help for the teams who quote unquote lost on the draft lottery to Atlanta. That there's not really I mean, I saw Alex Sarves kind of like the number one, I guess you would say consensus, but I even saw mocks from as recently as yesterday that didn't have him number one. So I guess Carson, if you come back and listen to the end of this, I guess that there's that as well as sort of a silver lining is the fact that it's not like you're missing out on a Wembanyama type of guy. But going back to NBA, actually, it was interesting to see things come out about Bronny James today and yesterday because everybody was talking about whether or not or where he was going to go. And obviously, a lot of people think he's going to go to the Lakers, who I think pick 55, I want to say, in the second round. But it's just fascinating to me to see the coverage based on people who clearly have more interest in him than than they otherwise would have because of the LeBron connection versus the people who who are evaluating it purely from a basketball standpoint. Because there are a lot of things that I've read, a lot of rankings that I've read. I read one big board that had him ranked 69th. It's clear there's a good number of people who think that he should go undrafted. So I'm curious who actually will draft him and how high he actually goes. Heard some positive things about his combine today, but it sounds like people pretty much have their minds made up one way or the other as to where they think he is in the draft sequence type of deal. Jody says, Scoops, Astros win tonight. It's 4 out of 5 and only 6 back. We are far from over. Yeah, I didn't leave y'all for dead at any point. I mean, we've gotten our asses handed to us way too much by y'all the last few years for me to make that mistake, especially because the last I went to Game 4 of the 2022, excuse me, ALCS during that was when we got swept 4-0 by y'all. So yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't count anything out, especially if some of the guys get healthy again. But I think people were getting super overzealous about it because obviously, they're probably the biggest disappointment in the AL right now. You could say the White Sox, but I think if you put it relative to expectations, I still think it's Houston. But again, when you've got that much talent on the team, it's not like they suddenly, lost half their roster or half their rosters out for the season or anything like that. These guys are not the guys that are struggling right now, or the guys that are injured right now. They're going to come back. This is not going to be the Astros team that we're going to see in September. I mean, I don't like Houston at all, and I'm still going to acknowledge that. And I still think that they're going to be a thorn in team side, even if they don't end up becoming a legitimate threat in the playoffs. I think that they're going to still play a thorn in team sides coming down the hunt in August and the dog days. The one team that keeps surprising, man, I said this the other day on Facebook, and I think people were wanting to have a wellness check on me, because I think that they were like, is this guy like actually typing, or did like someone like type this on his account? But no, it's the fact that Oakland has been as competitive as they've been. Like I said, don't sleep on them. Now, again, do I think that they're going to actually win the AOS? No. Do I think that they're even going to make the playoffs? No. But I think that's a team that people, again, left for dead not that long ago, and pretty significantly. I mean, again, we heard everything about from their owner. We saw, if you haven't seen it, Trevor May, former Athletics pitcher who just retired, talked about Fisher on his podcast and completely just ripped him in half. So I think people, for good reason, again, just kind of left Oakland, in the dust. But they are a team who has played teams tough. They played Tampa tough. They played New York tough. Another team, I want to say it was Milwaukee. I can't remember who, but there was another good team that they played tough. This is a team that you cannot, you can't just go in and expect to roll them over. You got to go in and you got to play them, seriously. They're not a team that you can go in and just say, oh, we should easily sweep this series. These guys are formidable. These guys are gritty. These guys are feisty, and they're not going down without a fight, no matter what's going on. And I respect the heck out of that from those players, because it'd be very easy, especially with what they're dealing with obviously the imminent relocation to Sacramento and then Las Vegas, the dearth of fans that are no longer showing up for fairly obvious reasons. So I tip my cap to the guys over there, both pitching and hitting, and the coaches over there, and just everybody who is not involved with the horrific mismanagement of that organization from the top, because the fact that they are even relevant in any sort of way is quite impressive. Got a message here. Okay. Thanks, Kenny. Just shout out real quick to Kenny, who's been helping me behind the scenes the last couple of weeks. Really appreciate that. But thank you for coming on and helping me out here. Trevor says, Avs forward Val something. I'm not going to. Nishushkin, I'm sorry if I butchered that, has been suspended 6 months without pay and has been placed in stage 3 of the league's players assistance program. Such a sad deal for everyone involved. Yeah, I read about that just before I came on the show. Didn't have the details, so thank you for sharing that, because I know very little about that. But I did hear about that. I gotta go and check in more as to kind of what that means, what the circumstances were, if anything's even come out yet. Because I know sometimes teams and leagues and players are a little more tight-lipped, understandably so, as to the circumstances behind those. But obviously, like you said, just it's very disappointing that that's transpired here over the last few hours. Mr. Osborne says, just hope the Avs can pull one out, especially in Denver. Pardon me. Yeah, again, I'm very much for all the guys that are affiliated with RMSN and just the the fans out in the that area in the Rocky Mountains and that part of the country. Highly hoping that you guys have a strong continuation in this series and hopefully going forward. Rooting very much for y'all to have some exciting and positive results over there. And I hope the same for the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, I've said repeatedly that I'm a big fan of Ant Edwards, but I'm hoping to see you guys have some exciting results there. I got a lot of Nikola Jokic is hilarious, man. I can't think of anybody in recent times, just in any other sport. I can't think of somebody who just seems so I don't know if apathetic is the word, but just seems completely just disconnected emotionally from the game. It's like he does treat it like a guy who's just exhausted on a 9 to 5 job, which again, I do respect his sort of like, shunning the fanfare and things like that. I don't think that his handling of it is necessarily a bad thing, but it's just it sticks out obviously very prominently when it's in the era and the time frame, and a league in particular that is very known for its players having big personalities, big media, big stardom, big fanfare, all this stuff. And then you've got a guy like Nikola Jokic, who's kind of just like wants no part of it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Derek Jeter in that way. Just somebody who was pretty much never liked having to engage with the media, and took his job obviously very seriously. Nicole's went from Nicola to Nicole. Nicole says he had problems with last year. Also remember the hotel room situation. Honestly, Nikki, I did not remember that, but obviously, we'll be hoping that he gets the help that he needs for obviously himself first and his loved ones thereafter. Jokic is quiet but funny. Oh yeah, he's hysterical. It's sometimes it's just he's so deadpan that I had to listen. I'm just like, was that a joke or is he being serious? Like ironically being the Joker, but like I genuinely have to like listen to him 2 or 3 times sometimes, because he said something last week. I don't remember if it was last week. I think it was. I'm pretty sure he said something like, when would he was asked like when the parade would be or something like that, and then I'm pretty sure it was him who was like, I have to go see my family or something like that. I don't want to do this, or I don't know. I can't remember the exact interaction in great detail, but his run-ins with the media are always so funny. And then speaking of Ant Edwards, I'm pretty sure he was the one who also had one in the last couple of days where he was just like, oh, that guy Aaron Gordon. He just was like, oh, I'm exhausted with Aaron Gordon. Kind of said it under his breath as he was getting up from the dais, which that was just funny. Jokic is quiet, funny, says Roy Osborne. Kenny, Yankees rotate. Hello. A Yankees question for you, Scoops. When Cole comes back, who is odd man out of rotation? Heel is pitching well enough to deserve a chance to stay in rotation, in my opinion. Yeah, like you said, I do think that we talked about earlier. I do think that he has shown at least a compelling case to get serious consideration for that. Cole's obviously going to come back at some point in, I think it was mid-June is when they were expecting. So in terms of who would get booted from the rotation, my thought right now would be Schmidt, just because I can't see Rodon. They're paying him too much money for that. Stroman, I think, has pitched fairly well. I don't think that they would want to drop him out. It would be between Cortez and Schmidt, and I just, for some reason, I think that I would lean towards Schmidt, only because I think even though it hasn't been as recent as we would like, I think Cortez has shown his potential as a starting pitcher at a higher ceiling, I think, than Clark Schmidt has, and I think that the Yankees still believe he can recapture that level. So I would have to say I think Schmidt's the odd man out. I hope it's only like bumping him to the bullpen. I hope that he's not demoted entirely, because I don't know if you saw what a goofball he was the other day, but there was, I don't even remember who we were playing, but there was a clip that was shown of him in the dugout, and it was actually like a compilation of like 3 or 4 minutes different worth of little clips that were put together. I think it was on Instagram. But it was just like I didn't realize what a character he is and what a goofball he is. But I became quite a fan of his pretty quickly with some of the craziness that I saw from him. He kind of, he definitely is helping keep the dugout and the clubhouse kind of loose and kind of just enjoying themselves. Verdugo, I've seen, I was hard on Verdugo, but I'm gonna I acknowledge things when I'm misread something or whatever the case. I think that Verdugo and Stroman have been very positive. It seems like for the clubhouse and the chemistry and the dugout and all of that. Was not expecting that would be the case, but it seems like they've been fitting in very well, and it seems like the team as a whole has really strong chemistry, and I love seeing that. That's stuff that I don't think we've seen since the days of Ronald Torreyes, Didi Gregorius, and company. Kenny says, I like that, Scoops. We need depth. Trevor says the players love Jokic. His teammates praise him any chance they get to. Edwards and Murray is going to be a matchup to watch. They got into it a bit after last night's game. I saw like a brief thing of that, but emphasis on the word brief. I saw very little of what transpired there, but Yeah, and again, one thing that I just respect out of guys like, again, I mentioned Jokic, mentioned Edwards. Obviously, very different personalities, but they seem like easy stars to root for. Like we see a lot of these superstars who come out and they either have polarizing personalities, or they have polarizing something about them that's polarizing, whether it's their game style, whether it's their personality, whether it's whatever it is. But guys like Jokic and guys like Ant Edwards, to me, are just Giannis is another one. To me, I think the NBA right now just has a lot of stars who are just easy to like and easy to root for, and I love seeing that. Obviously, I'm a New Orleans fan, but just looking around the league and just seeing guys who I'm like, you know what, if it's a neutral series, I have no problem rooting for this team, and I actively will root for this team because of this player, which is just something I think that's nice to be able to see, because I mean, obviously in other sports, you get guys like Mahomes, you get guys like, you going back a few years in baseball, A-Rod and such, guys who tend to be, and of course you got NHL, you have Connor McDavid is one example I can think of. Sidney Crosby, it's a lot less unanimous, the support for them, I would say. Overall, Noxie from Mr. Osborne. Mr. Osborne, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean overall Noxie. Oh, Moxie. Oh, okay. I got what you're saying now. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And just gonna verify if there's any additional comments. Seeing no further ones, I'm actually gonna wrap this up now, I think, because I've gone a few minutes over the buzzer, and I apologize for that. But I appreciate those who stuck in with me these extra few moments as I continued on finishing up those last couple of topics. But want to give one more shout out, of course, to my buddy Carson Shear. Again, one last time, go follow the Carson Shear Show over on Instagram. And I know he's on other platforms, and I'll try and get a post out later to verify which ones those are, so that you guys, if you don't have Instagram, can go, because I highly recommend his content. But again, just want to thank the many people. This was a very active show. This was had a lot of people in. Thank you to Jess and Nikki. Jess was in for the first time. A couple of others. So thank you all so much, and of course the regulars from Mr. Osborne to Jody to Keith, Kenny, and everybody. So thank you all so much, and looking forward to now. Again, I know we've had some changes of timing recently, so I just want to just say that for now we are back on schedule with What's the Scoops on Sunday nights going forward, and for now it's going to stay Friday for Settle the Scores. That's subject to potentially have an update soon, but for now, the times of the shows and the shows themselves are back at their regularly scheduled times after a little bit of changes the last couple of weeks. So thank you all for sticking with me through that. Thank you all for being active with me through those shows. And as usual, I'm going to be signing off saying see you on Friday on the Rocky Mountain Sports Network, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, for us settling the scores with the Colorado Rockies. And sorry about that. And come back here on Sunday at 9 o'clock Eastern for one more episode 25 of What's the Scoop. Same scoop time, same scoop channel, scoop